Hello Year 11, happy Monday. Good morning, good afternoon. I don't know when you're going to be doing this. Let's just recap on what we covered in the 5 lessons last week. So what do we know so far? We started off looking at context, and you should have detailed notes and then those notes condensed down into bullet points covering the context elements of family honour, patriarchal society, attitudes to women, religion, courtly love and fate. We then moved on and we looked at the prologue. Remember, the prologue is the 14-line introduction to the play, so sonnet form. It sets the scene. It contains enormous plot spoiler, and because of this plot spoiler, the prologue acts like fate, as we know there is no escape for Romeo and Juliet, and that they will be dead by the end of the play. And finally, we moved on to Act 1, Scene 1, which Shakespeare starts in a very action-packed way. Make sure he grasps his audience's attention, and it's split into 2 halves. So it introduces the theme of conflict with that fight scene in the first half, and then it introduces the theme of love through the conversation between Romeo and Benvolio. Fantastic. Right, let's move on to today's lesson. For today's lesson, you will need both your pink exercise book, beautifully delivered by myself and my daughter last week, and you will need your A4 copy of Romeo and Juliet, which I gave out before Christmas, or delivered to those 2 people who were poorly and not in school. So can you pause me, please, and make sure that you have your pink, your new sparkling pink exercise book and your copy of Romeo and Juliet. Brilliant. See you on the next screen. Okay, folks, so here we go. So the point of reading your context was to remind you about what Elizabethan audience, what their attitudes would be like to women at that time, and to understand the importance of the father figure and how he ruled over everybody else, and his word was the word that everybody obeyed. Okay, so in this scene, we've got Capulet, Juliet's father. We've got the character Paris. We haven't met him before. He is a young man who is supposed to be very good looking, comes from a very wealthy family, and from a family who has good social position in Verona. So he is pretty much a fantastic match for Juliet. And he has just asked Capulet if he can have Juliet's hand in marriage. Okay, so looking at my underlining of 1, if you remember, at the end of the prince's speech, he says that he wants to see Capulet and Montague to discuss the fight and the way forward. He sees them separately, but Capulet seems to think that that discussion went well and that peace is going to be found, because he says, but Montague is bound as well as I. So they've both given their word to the prince that no more fighting is going to take place. And if they tell their families that no more fighting is going to happen, then because of the patriarchal society, Capulet should be obeyed, just as the prince should be obeyed. But as we know, that fighting over the ancient grudge, the argument between these 2 families, isn't going to stop, and it's going to result in Romeo and Juliet's death. And then it looks like he's quite happy to do that, because line 2 that we're underlining, for men so old as we to keep the peace. So Capulet is quite happy to keep the peace with the Montagues. He doesn't want to be their best friends, but he, at this stage in the play, says, it's not that hard, we can do it. But notice he talks about we. He uses the pronoun we when talking about men so old. So we see the failing here, because whilst Montague and Capulet might be able to keep the peace because they are older. The younger generations, Tybalt, Romeo, and the servants, they're not old, and they will find it much harder to keep the peace. Paris responds, of honourable reckoning are you both, and pity 'tis you lived at odds so long. But now, my lord, what say you to my suit? So the noun here, suit, we still use it in this way today. It basically means, what do you think of my question? What have you got to say about the fact that I've asked for Juliet's hand in marriage? Capulet replies, but saying over what I have said before. So by repeating the answer that I've already given you. And the answer that he has given Paris is, my child is yet a stranger in the world. She hath not seen the change of 14 years. Let 2 more summers wither in their pride, ere we may think her ripe to be a bride. So, look at number 5. He calls Juliet a stranger in the world. So we've got the noun there, stranger. So why has he used that? Well, as you'll remember, women had a lesser place in society, and young women were not allowed out onto the streets without an adult with them. We call it a chaperone, someone to make sure that they don't misbehave, that they're safe and that they're protected. So here he talks about the fact that Juliet is a stranger. She hasn't been out into the streets of Verona on her own. She doesn't know the world. She doesn't know the dangers. She doesn't know how to protect herself. She's not been put in that position. Notice also how he calls her a child, which to us as a modern audience seems a bit ironic that he's talking about his child and his child getting married. Next line down tells us that she hath not seen the change of 14 years. So she's not quite 14. So at the start of the play, Juliet is 13. This shocks us as a modern audience, the idea of someone marrying at 13, but folks, you need to get over this. At the time the play is set, for women to marry at 13 was quite usual. They had a much shorter life expectancy, so if you were going to get on and have a family, you had to get on and do it quickly. Okay, so you might be shocked by it, but you mustn't allow yourself to be. It's what it is. His advice to Paris is, let 2 more summers wither in their pride. So basically he said, you're not marrying Juliet yet. So he uses this metaphor of 2 summers withering, so 2 summers passing, 2 summers dying. And when those 2 summers have passed, then we may think her ripe to be a bride. Okay, so in 2 years' time, I think she might be ready to take a husband. On that final line, look at the use of the word ripe. Again, here that's an adjective. Her ripe, that's how he describes her, ripe to be a bride. I don't know about you, but ripe makes me think of fruit. Okay, and when a piece of fruit is ripe, that means it's ready. So here, Capulet is saying, in 2 years' time, I think she'll be ready to be a bride. But if you go a bit beyond this, you think about the control that suggests that her father and then her husband will have over her life. She might be ready to marry now. She might be ready to marry in 2 years, or she might never be ready. But Juliet herself has no control over this. She must obey, firstly her father and then her husband. Paris shows a bit of a lack of respect for Capulet here because he questions Capulet's judgment. Now, in a patriarchal society and with courtly love, when Paris asks for Juliet's hand, he shouldn't then have an argument with the father about the response he gives. He should be respectful to that father because he is the head of the household. However, Paris says, younger than she are happy mothers made. So he uses the comparative adjective younger, suggesting that there is nothing wrong with Juliet's age. He knows younger girls within Verona who are already not only married, but are already mothers, and that they are happy in that position. So what we get here from the beginning of this scene is dialogue between these two men, one who already controls Juliet and the other who is looking to control her, and they are discussing this very important decision without her there. Okay, right, on to the next screen. Continuing on then, Capulet's response to Paris saying, well, there's plenty of other young girls who are married and mothers of Juliet's age. Capulet says, and too soon marred are those so early made. Right, marred, the word means spoilt. So Capulet seems to be saying here that if girls marry too early, then their potential to be good partners, good wives, even good people perhaps, is spoilt. There's the suggestion here that this line is based on Capulet's own marriage and that he hasn't actually had a very good marriage. He married his wife very young, and she was 13 when she had Juliet. So perhaps there's sort of a bit of an autobiographical message in this from Capulet, that he married his own wife early and she was a mother early, and he feels that through that she was spoilt. Anyway, you can decide. Perhaps it's just a general comment about young girls marrying, or perhaps it is directed at his own wife and his own marriage. Line number 2 tells us that Juliet is the only child that the Capulets have, because the earth hath swallowed all my hopes but she. That we don't know how many other children Lady Capulet gave birth to, but the personification there of the earth hath swallowed all my hopes, relates to the idea of them having been buried. So the only hope he has of his line continuing, the only hope he has of enjoying a child of his own, is through Juliet. You could talk about foreshadowing here, because obviously all of his other children are already buried in the earth, and we know that before the end of the play Juliet is going to be dead, so she might be the only one he's got left now, but by the end of the play he's not going to have any hope left on the earth in the form of a child. So could write about the personification of the earth swallowing all of his children, or you could write about it as foreshadowing Juliet's death, which we know is to come. Line 3, but woo her, gentle Paris, get her heart. Capulet's advice to Paris is to spend time getting to know Juliet, wooing her. It's a very old-fashioned term, to woo somebody. It means to spend time with them. It means to make them feel important and valued and cherished. And through those things, Capulet says that Paris might get her heart, i.e. he might win her love. Line 4, my will to her consent is but a part. So consent means to agree to it. Capulet here shows himself to be a bit of a modern father actually for Elizabethan times, as he seems to be suggesting that it's not just down to his will, his decision, who Juliet marries. That's only a part of it. And that at this stage of the play, he feels that Juliet should have some say in the matter, some choice, which is surprising because you would expect a young girl of that time to be told who to marry in order to improve the wealth or the social status of her family. So Capulet appears to be a kind and caring father. Line 5 and 6. This night I hold an old accustomed feast, whereto I have invited many a guest. These two lines signal a really important structural event within the play. Capulet is holding a big bash this evening at his house, and he has invited a whole load of people. He has invited many a guest, and he's inviting Paris to it. And at the party, Paris will be able to meet Juliet, and he will be able to start his wooing. It's a bit ironic because it's actually at the party that Juliet meets Romeo, and poor old Paris, he doesn't get a look in. But anyway, we'll deal with that when we get to it. So there's a party tonight and loads of people are invited. Finally, on this screen, number 7, Capulet says to Paris that at his house there will be this evening earth-treading stars that make dark heaven light. Okay, this is a metaphor for Capulet describing beautiful women who will be at the party. Okay, so they're going to be beautiful and they're going to be bright and dazzling. And to show that, Shakespeare uses the noun stars. He then uses the adjective earth-treading stars to describe them. Obviously stars don't normally tread on the earth, so it's this idea of women and their beauty being put on a pedestal. So we're going to have these lovely women there, and they will make the darkness of our life heaven light because they will be so beautiful. However, the last time we read about stars was in the prologue. And so what this actually does is it links back to the idea that Romeo and Juliet are going to end up as stars at the end of the play because they are going to die. So whilst Capulet is describing how many beautiful women there will be there tonight, comparing them to the stars, there's also foreshadowing going on here, reminding us that Juliet will be there. She will be one of these earth-treading stars, but she won't be earth-treading for much longer because she's going to cease to exist, and she will become a star, possibly up in heaven, as a result of her having died. Okay, we're going to finish with the annotating there. I think that's enough for one day. On the next screen, you're going to have a series of questions to answer. Okay, see you there. Right, turn to your pink books. Hopefully you've copied up or stuck in the work from the beginning of last week before I managed to get the pink books to you. If not, leave pages, because obviously, well, not obviously, but we want the work in order. So put the title on your next page, wherever you are. Act 1, Scene 2, Capulet and Paris. Okay, and to finish off today's lesson, I've just got 6 questions for you to answer. Your year 10, you don't need me to read through them with you. At the minute, apart from the last one, most of these are more factual, understanding the language. I'm not asking you to write P paragraphs here. I am asking you to write in sentences, but answer these questions just to check, to challenge, to make sure that you understand the content of the annotating that we have just done. Okay, so that's it for today, folks. I'll see you tomorrow. Keep safe. Bye. Okay, well done everybody. Hopefully your Romeo and Juliet text is starting to look quite busy. You're getting a feel for the fact that Shakespeare's language isn't as difficult as you thought it was. That you can actually sit there and work out some of what he's writing on his own. Excellent. So if you can get those paragraphs to me about Capulet, so today's Tuesday's lesson. So if I could have those paragraphs straight away, because they're easy to upload onto Teams, but certainly during the day on Wednesday, so that I can get those commented on and back to you. Okay, see you tomorrow.